we anticipate being back in Washington, D.C. soon, so we're going to want fighter participation. We encourage anyone who wants to get involved to contact us, any of the fighters, myself. Also, go to ufcclassaction.com, put in your email. If you want any questions or you want to speak with any of the attorneys, let us know in the comment section. That will be confidential. And know that you are now part of the class. You don't have to do anything. You don't need to retain your own counsel. You are represented.
Hey everyone, thank you for watching the Bruno Galan Talk Show. I'm here today with Rob Maysey of the MMAFA, which stands for the Mixed Martial Arts Fighters Association. And I just want to mention on a previous channel of mine called Bruno's MMA Show, I already talked to Rob, so if we make mention of any previous conversations, that's where it is. I'll put a link down below along with all the MMAFA links. So Rob, basically, but we're going to pretend, of course, this is the first conversation, new channel, so all that. And but I want to just say real quick, in the previous conversation, we went a lot on the why of fighters' rights, and I think we kind of took an approach where if someone was undecided on why should fighters deserve better pay and all that, we went a lot over that. I'm not saying we're not going to touch on that in this conversation, but we're likely to touch upon a lot of new events that happened recently that Rob is gonna, as a lawyer, is gonna convey a lot better than I ever could. But if anyone's undecided after watching this, if anyone's like, well, do fighters deserve this? We went a lot more on that aspect of the conversation in the previous conversation. So I'll put the link to my other channel. I just wanted to say that. Enough chatter from me right now. Rob, what can you tell us about yourself and the MMAFA?
Yeah, so my name is Rob Maysey. I grew up in a baseball family. My brother played baseball, so I knew how the baseball association worked, and I knew sort of the interplay between antitrust, bargaining, and league sports. So in law school, I started doing jiu-jitsu, and we would do it in the Cornell wrestling room. And then when I graduated law school, I moved to Los Angeles. I ended up at Beverly Hills Jiu-Jitsu for a time, and then shortly after Eddie Bravo opened his gym, I was at 10th Planet. One of our teammates, USC 44, gets invited to fight. He was on the undercard against Josh Thompson, so our gym drove out to watch him. And at that time, the lower bowl would be full from the prelims on, and the upper bowl would be empty. In large part, that was because gyms would come out. We could still afford seats. They'd be, $75, $100 for 8 rows up. They weren't that expensive at that time. So we started going to the events. And just a story about that fight. So Gerald, after his fight, he loses, I believe, at the end of the first round. He comes into the stands after his fight. He's asking to borrow money to get home to Oregon, which kind of just blew me away. I'm like, what is going on? So I started asking questions at the gym, trying to figure out, how is that possible? For much of the 2000s, guys would actually be out of pocket money to fight in the UFC because they're paying for their medicals, they're paying for brain scans, they're flying out corners. Sometimes they have to get extra hotel rooms, things like that. The economics of this were just absurd to me. So I started, doing calculations. Well, there's 15,000 people here. The merchandise lines were literally 100 deep at that time. I mean, they were just jam-packed. Average ticket price, $100, $150. And then you add on top of that pay-per-views. It just didn't add up. But I was very, very convinced the fighters were getting tiny percentage of their revenue. Which ended up being correct. We were proven correct through our antitrust suit. We actually got the data, and the data they were below 20% of event revenue, basically every year, and that's the intent. The intent is you will never get above 20%, and in fact, as the UFC's revenues have gone up in the past 4 to 5 years, fighter share has actually decreased. John Nash estimated last year's revenue share is 13%. Just to compare that to other sports, other league sports are about 50%, And the most comparable, almost identical sport, boxing, those guys are 70 to 80% of revenue because they are literally the product.
Yeah.
So I started in the 2000s, the MMAFA, and when I first started, I would basically FedEx packages and folders, brochures to gyms trying to get in, because my circle was just basically Southern California. I was doing legal favors for guys that I met through the gym, and we would do grappling tournaments, sort of locally in Orange County, Southern California, LA area. Some gyms from Las Vegas would come in. So my contact circle was basically West Coast. I got no response at all for probably 2-3 years. And I'm writing articles as if I'm talking to people, but I wasn't, until Elite XC. Elite XC was a fairly prominent promotion who was doing big shows. It became apparent at some point in time around 2008, 2009, that they were out of money and they weren't going to put on any more shows. But what they weren't doing is they weren't releasing fighters. What they wanted to do is sit around and wait for a bidder to come and acquire them. Well, fighters after about 6 months got tired of waiting, and eventually I got called by some of these agents. Hey, what can we do? And I said, well, you can file suit. We can file for a declaratory action to get you out of your contracts. But if you do that individually, just the expenses alone on service and filing is going to be $450 to $500 per fighter. The agents were like, well, shoot, I have 20, I have 18, I have 12. And my response to them was, or we can file one suit as the MMAFA on behalf of members. And they were like, we can do that. I said, yeah, we can do that. And I actually proved it up to them. So what we ended up doing is we drafted a complaint. We forwarded it to Elite XC. We hadn't filed it yet, and we gave them a week. If this is not resolved in a week, we are filing this lawsuit. And it was resolved in a week. The contracts were sold to Strikeforce.
Yeah.
Guys were happy. After that point in time, the agents knew who I was. My pool sort of expanded because I did something. I showed a result.
Yeah.
So now when I called and I wanted information, I would actually get responses. They'd answer the phone. They'd show me what I wanted to see. That started about 2009. I did a presentation at West Virginia Law School, I believe in 2011. One of the writers got a hold of that presentation, published it. Some fighters, again, saw that. At the end of that presentation in West Virginia, one of the professors asked, well, why hasn't there been an antitrust suit? And my response, I still remember this. My response was, because I don't have a plaintiff yet.
Yeah.
We didn't have a plaintiff.
Crazy, huh?
Yeah. So in 2012, I get a call. It goes into my voicemail, and at that time I was sort of, because I did a lot of favors for writers, for fighters, for managers, and I was favored out. I was tired. So I was kind of blowing this call off. It sat in my voicemail for days, and so I listened to it again, kind of mumbled. I'm like, all right, I'll call. So I call this number. I have no idea who it is because it was kind of a mumbly voicemail. Play phone tag. Finally, I get him on the phone, and he's like, yeah, I was given your contact information. I wanted to know if I fly into Arizona, can we meet up? And I'm like, who is this? It's like, Carlos Newton. Like, who? He's like, Carlos Newton. Like, from Toronto? He's like, yeah. I was like, oh, wow, I should be talking to this guy. I was like, where did you get my contact information? He said, Pat Miletich. I was like, oh, okay. So I said, sure, yeah, come into Arizona. We'll meet up. And I'm thinking we're going to go to dinner or something. Yeah. No. Carlos flies in, stays a mile from my house, wants me to pick him up in the morning, drive him to my law office, and take him home at dinner time. He sat in a conference room on Westlaw pulling cases. So about 3 days later, I take him to a baseball game. I sort of had an idea as to why he's here.
Yeah.
But I asked him, I said, like, Carlos, what are we doing, man? He's like, I know you figured this out. You're going to file the antitrust suit. And I'm like, dude, I'm a real estate lawyer. He's like, I don't care. You're going to file it.
Oh, I didn't know that. So I didn't know that from the last conversation. You're a real estate lawyer.
Yeah, I was a real estate lawyer. Yeah.
Oh, that's not the same.
So at the end of March 2012, we started this case. I basically spent a year researching. I wrote I started writing 15-page memos and sending them out because I needed to recruit, the big national class action firms to come do this suit with me. So I started with 15-page memos. I got no response. Did a 25-page memo, no response.
Yeah.
I spent 6 months. I wrote a 117-page memo with 300 exhibits and put them in a binder that was like 3 of them about like that, and FedExed them to these firms across the country within like a week. We had meetings. Soon after that, these firms joined on the case, and we ended up with the best firms in the country that do this. So that's how the lawsuit started. That sort of gives you my background as to how I got involved in this, and sort of what we're doing now.
It's great. By the way, if anyone wondering, I realized that my microphone wasn't set up. I'm just so I don't want to mess with it. Everything's recording, so sure. If I took it off, that was why. It's kind of crazy to me because that actually rings very true. Like when you say like, "Oh, I'm a real estate lawyer," and I was like, "No, you're doing this." And what I've known of fighters is like, for them, trust is this thing where beyond what you're supposed to be, like you're supposed to be real estate, blah, blah, but he's like, no, but I trust you. And it's one of those things like for fighters, and to kind of try to explain the MMA sport as far as legal rights for the fighters is like, we're talking like decades in the past, like maybe a quarter century. You'll know better than me, but like we're talking like, as far as fighter rights goes, like we're talking like way in the past, and it's growing and it's growing, and The Rock is like siphoning that brand, and like everyone is trying to jump in, and the fighters are getting screwed over, and in big ways. It's just so for anyone, like again in the other video we go a lot more over that, but when you come to a point where what you wish for a fighter who's kind of like out of his prime is not like, oh, time to retire, and like in NFL, NHL, like they retire with so much money, and okay, the time has come. Like in MMA, you often see fighters stick around too long because they can't afford to retire, or what you wish for them is to go fight a YouTuber in a boxing fight so they can make more money they ever made. It's like it's as if a hockey player was wishing after their career, after their prime, that they're going to do a soccer match against YouTubers. It makes no sense. So. And then for casuals to be like, oh, well, he wasn't that good at boxing, was he? Well, yeah, that wasn't his sport. And yeah, I still wanted to mention it real quick. Like we're talking like decades in the past as far as like rights go. And for anyone saying like they're still getting paid a lot, it's about having your fair share. Like if you bring this much, you should make this much. Like it's not like. But again, in the other video, you and I listened to it the other day to kind of refresh my memories 3 years ago, but we went over in detail. I'll put the link down below. But Rob, I think our time will be.
It was almost exactly 3 years ago.
I know, it's
August
so funny.
27th.
I think last year I texted you and was like, "Hey, by the way, can you show the shirt to the camera, because it's really sweet and we don't." Yeah, there you go.
Sorry.
If we ever meet, you're giving me one, right? One of those shirts.
Sure.
I'll wear it. But seriously,
we'll send you shirts.
Huh?
We'll send you shirts.
Really? Okay. Well, yeah. I'll send my information later. Don't think I won't mooch off for some free T-shirts or shirts. I don't know what kind of shirts they are.
Yeah. So just to sort of riff off what you were saying, I mean, just to give you an idea, there was multi-million-dollar, adjusted for inflation boxing matches in the 1900s, 1907. Where the fighters themselves were making 7-figure paydays in inflation-adjusted dollars. So just to say MMA is behind, not only is it behind, it's unprecedented.
I don't even know.
the trick that was pulled.
That's insane to me. I never thought. I guess MMA, because I got into sports with MMA, so I guess I can assume that's how it starts.
No, I mean, to say MMA is behind, it's behind more than 150 years, and in fact, it's not behind. It got corrupted from the start.
It's unprecedented.
It's unprecedented, and the trick that was pulled was in boxing. The boxer hires a promoter. Boxers compete for titles, and promoters compete for boxers. In MMA, what they did was they removed the need to corrupt a sanctioning body. They just eliminated the sanctioning body. Yeah. So now, when the UFC went out and bought up Pride, Strikeforce, WEC, WFA's assets, the IFL.
Isn't that ridiculous when you list
there's only one belt to fight for. It's just their belt.
Yeah.
Their belt is the only one that matters. And as evidence of that, through our antitrust suit, we got an email from Joe Silva. Joe Silva emails Lorenzo and Dana. The email was basically a compilation of the top weight or the major weight classes in a list of the 1 through 15 ranked fighters. Following the Strikeforce purchase, which happened about 6 weeks later, the UFC had virtually all 1 through 15 in every weight division. The email was this simple. He put in the subject line, "We own MMA." That's it. That's all he said. And that's because instead of fighters competing for titles, fighters must compete against each other to get into the UFC. They reversed it. The problem with this is, and this is, it's an educational process because this is not apparent to most, is what the UFC is doing is not even a sport. And by that, any other sport, if you win, you ascend. You win, you ascend. You win, you ascend. Because the UFC doesn't use a sanctioning body, they determine if you ascend. And they condition that ascension on you're signing this contract. Oh, you don't sign it? Well, then you're not ready to move up. They just push you to the side.
Yeah.
Or they do this repeatedly. You'll see this happened to Aljamain Sterling a couple of years ago, where Dana would say, Aljo's not ready for a title shot yet.
Yeah.
And that I'm just letting the audience know.
He was the example you gave last time.
Yeah. That is code for he hasn't signed his extension yet.
Yeah.
No other sport operates like this. Boxing doesn't operate this. In fact, this is illegal in boxing. What's occurring in the UFC. I believe what the UFC is doing is illegal, even currently with the state athletic commissions. The state athletic commission is sanctioning a sport and telling the viewing public these are title bouts. Well, the UFC's own promotional agreements say the titles aren't real, they're ceremonial. That's what the UFC told Congress. They're not real, they're ceremonial.
Yeah.
Well, then what are you sanctioning? This is fighting to fight, which is illegal in virtually every jurisdiction. Why was this allowed?
Yeah. Do you think that Dana is shifting to did the whole slap fighting thing because he thinks that the writing's on the wall for MMA and he wants to keep doing that crap to other people? So he just went with slap fighting to be able to keep doing that sort of stuff.
So slap fighting is truly boggling to me.
I hate it, but they're describing it as a combat sport. That's how they have described it as a combat sport. I mean, it's not a combat sport to me. It's just. But okay, putting my opinions aside on that, let's say to the fighters' rights, and let's call them fighters if they're going to call it a combat sport, right? Or whatever.
Here's my problem with it.
Yeah.
In order to do slap fighting, the UFC needed a state athletic commission to sanction it. And what that sanction does is it removes liability from the promoter. If that wasn't sanctioned by the Nevada State Athletic Commission, the UFC is now liable for when these guys get brain damage or somebody breaks their neck or somebody dies. They would be liable. If they get it sanctioned as a sport, now they push off the liability onto the state. The state allowed us to do this. They sanctioned it. Don't come at us. How is that a sport when you literally can't defend?
But let's say,
reminds me.
I feel like that would cannibalize a bit of our time on the subject matters we need to touch upon. But I fully agree. It's I hate it. I hate slap fighting. I think, and I had Tim Sylvia in my previous channel, Bruno's MMA Show, back when his arm was like he broke his arm in the UFC, and then he had a metal plate, and his arm was getting complications. They had that like pus coming out and stuff like that, and the UFC refused to pay because he was no longer on the contract with them. And they said, well, you kept fighting after. Like, yeah, he kept having his career. And he couldn't fight him anymore or something. And now he's in stop fighting. And it's just like, so I'm kind of seeing how, and maybe this is too much of a diversion from what we should really be talking about regarding MMA. But I guess I wanted to kind of mention how it seems that the writing's on the wall where MMA fighters are about to get better rights. And Ngannou kind of, not thanks to any changes in the law, but through his own sheer will and just determination, kind of like got out of that UFC hamster wheel and set a path, like as an example, like you're doing a legal precedent. I guess Ngannou kind of also recently went like, look, you can get out of this.
Do you know how Francis got out of his contract?
Well, because of you guys, they gave him a different kind of contract where it was possible, difficult, extremely difficult, but possible. Like Jim Carrey, you tell me there's one chance of getting out of the contract. And as a champion still, I mean, they took away the championship, but everyone knows he's a champion. And because of you guys, of course, this is why I bring him up as well, because it's relevant. Okay, you know what, let's put less stuff aside, because we have a lot to talk about. Go ahead.
So here's the real shame of that. So Francis becomes a free agent.
Yeah.
If he was a boxer, his next fight would be against John Jones. They would do it. Francis's promoter and John Jones's promoter would pull together, and they would promote the biggest fight in MMA history. Those guys would probably make $35 million each off of that bout, because that bout would probably make $80 to $85 million. They could do it in Cowboy Stadium. Instead, Francis has to go into boxing. He's not a boxer. That not only is that dangerous, it's a shame, because he's got to go into a sport he doesn't excel at to get a payday. And it's because he doesn't have an opponent to make that match in MMA. He's got to go into boxing.
Well, I agree. I will say, though, that it's public knowledge that Francis always wanted to box. So I guess in his case, you can also chalk it up to, because he did sign with PFL. They gave him really good deals. And I mean, again, it's going to get better. I'm sure you guys are going to win. Yeah, but I'm sure it's going to get better. But for the time being, with the rules as they are, let's say, but I think he always wanted to do that, I should say. But there's, putting that aside, I'm not counter-arguing you, though, because I guess I'm just putting on the table my knowledge of he did want to do boxing since the beginning. But,
well, yes,
but there's a lot of fighters end up like, end up boxing just to make money.
You don't start your career against the champion, right? Which is what he's going to do.
It's true. It's going to be ugly. Yeah. Good point. Yeah. Okay. So you know what? We're 20 something minutes in, and I think we need to address this, because this is why, a year ago I was like, hey, do you want to do another one, like a follow-up, because I started this new talk show, and you were like, and you actually texted me, let's wait until there's something to talk about, like something new. And I was like, okay, fair enough. And, sure enough, the news came out, and I texted you. I was like, Rob, do you want to do one? You're like, yep, it's time. So tell me what happened, Rob. Why are we talking again?
Yeah. So the last time we spoke was August 27th, 2020. And at that time, I believe we were coming up on a hearing on class certification, which I think happened in September.
Yes, it was. I think it was around that time. I think it's when a lot of information was revealed to the public.
Yes.
Was that at the same time? Yeah, I think so, right?
Yeah. So at that time, we had a hearing like towards the end of September 2020, where the judge verbally told us he was going to grant certification to our bout class. Now, that wasn't final until we got a written opinion. What happened sort of in the interim was COVID caused a delay in the courts.
Yeah.
And there was also another Ninth Circuit case dealing with class certification standards that was on appeal in the Ninth Circuit, which is where we are. That's where we filed. Nevada courts are in the Ninth
I'm
Circuit.
sorry. I'm going to interrupt right now. I'm putting my dunce hat on here. Everything I know from law is basically watching Suits. So, and the legal evil on YouTube sometimes. So, where Harvey Specter spars people in boxing without a mouthpiece as he talks, of course. But what's the Ninth Circuit? Because it sounds like it's like a vampire court or something, but I'm sure that's not it.
Yeah, no. So there's federal courts in states. So
yeah.
our case is pending in federal district court in Las Vegas, Nevada. The appellate level is a group of states. So it's Nevada, California, Washington, Oregon, Arizona, and I think that's it. I think those 5 comprise the Ninth Circuit. At the appellate level, it's one step above us.
Sorry, ninth or night?
Ninth. The number 9. Ninth.
Oh, I heard Ninth Circuit, so I was like,
no. So we're in the Ninth Circuit.
That's why I said a vampire court. I was like, okay, what's the deal?
So literally
Ninth
in about
Circuit, okay.
In about somewhere around 2021, a case went up on appeal. The Ninth Circuit took it that dealt directly with class certification standards. So our judge, who was at the trial level, the trial, not the appellate level, but the trial court, our judge knew this case was pending on appeal in the Ninth Circuit. That's above him. He was waiting for that decision to come out because he wanted it to guide him in writing his opinion in our case.
But it had nothing to do with MMA. It was just a similar antitrust case?
Correct. It was a similar antitrust case that dealt with class certification standards.
Okay.
The case was called Olean. So he waited for that opinion to come out, and then he wrote his opinion. That's part of the reason we basically had a 3-year delay. It was those 2 reasons. It's kind of bad luck on our part that we ran into the pandemic, and at the same time, this case directly dealing with class certification standards was up on appeal in our circuit.
But what would happen? And Aaron, sorry if I interrupt, but I feel like I guess my method right now is if I don't understand something, I might as well ask it, because I guess a lot of viewers want to understand it as well, because we're not lawyers. Yes. What if so this was a personal choice that he made to see, just because of the timing, they were going to have a result before him, or could he have made a decision that went before the other class action lawsuit?
He could have issued his decision before that appellate decision came out, but he told us, I mean, he was basically upfront about this. He told us, if I do that, I risk having to redo my opinion based upon the result of what that appellate court said. So I would rather wait because I don't want to do it twice.
But why would they have precedence if he did it first? And again, I get, not a lawyer. If he does it first, is it because they started first that their decision would have precedence over his?
No, it's because what the appellate court says in their decision is going to control the trial court judge's opinion, not the other way around.
Because they're one level above, right? You said at the beginning. Yes. Got it. Okay, very well. Yes. Sorry, carry on.
So that's what happened. We finally got the written order last Tuesday certifying the class. And what that means is we filed the case with 6 named plaintiffs. It was Kung Lee, Nate Corey, John Fitch, Brandon Vera, Javi Vasquez, and Kyle Kingsbury. And we're when we filed the lawsuits, we tell the judge, while 6 fighters are named, they are requesting your certification to file on behalf of all of the other fighters who participated in a bout from December 16, 2010 until June 30th, 2017. That order finally came out, and what that order means is now our lawsuit isn't 6 asking to file on behalf of the other ones. It's now those 6 are representing 1,214 fighters that are in the class. Our case just became much more real with that. Just to explain the timeframes, because I know I get asked about this. The reason our case goes back to December 16, 2010 is that's just statutory. Antitrust lawsuit, it dates back 4 years from the date of filing. We filed our lawsuit December 16, 2014. So we get to go back 4 years. And then the reason it ended June 30th, 2017 was that was the end of the data that we received from the UFC by our experts. So they couldn't model damages past that date. So we stopped it. So
Okay.
what we did, so we didn't lose any time. There wasn't a time period gap. Was in June of 2021, we filed a second suit with CB Dalloway and Cajun Johnson that looks back 4 years. So it goes back to June 30th, 2017.
You pick
forward.
up where you left off.
Yes. So we didn't have,
okay.
So we don't have a time period gap.
Okay. Now, again, like I'm going to be asking questions that might be obvious to you, but I think, I feel that if I'm wondering this, probably others will. I'm going to stop saying that. I feel like I'm defending myself from having to ask this. But this information, how did you get it, and why did it go only up to 2017? Yeah, that's the question. Yeah.
We got through the discovery process. So when we file suit, we send at the very beginning of the lawsuit, we send basically a notice to Zuffa. You are subject to a lawsuit. Preserve all documents.
So you have to hand over the information.
You have to hand over the information. Yes, and we went to the judge.
That I know from suits. Okay.
Yes, we sent over requests for production to Zuffa, and we did subpoenas to third parties. Just to give you an idea as to the scope, we ended up getting, and I could be off, by a little bit, but it was in the neighborhood of 1.6 million documents in this case. To give the audience an idea as kind of the workload of that, there was probably 30 to 35 people doing document review for basically a year and a half. There was a team of economists going through all of the UFC promotional agreements, all of the purse information, to come up with a damage model to see if we could show class-wide impact, and also to estimate how much fighters were damaged.
And this is because it really required all of that, or were they given more than they needed to overwhelm you guys?
They're supposed to be responsive to our requests. So just as an example, one of the early discovery disputes was, do we need medical? Do we need the medical or drug testing information that the UFC has on fighters? They wanted to give it to us. We did not want it. So we had a magistrate judge in Nevada. Once we got transferred over there, and we had this discovery dispute in front of the judge, and the judge said, yeah, it's not relevant to an antitrust case. Don't give it to them. So there was a,
Got it. So they were trying to send you more stuff. They were trying to overwhelm you with useless data.
It's not relevant to our case. There's reasons why they probably wanted to give it to us, and obviously there was reasons we did not want it. But those disputes get heard by a judge. And there was a number of them. I mean, we wanted information going back to 2001. They wanted to start their information in 2010. The magistrate gave us from 2005. These disputes are basically handled by the judge if we can't negotiate between us. That's sort of the process as to how that occurred. And then when they produce the documents, they basically put them on a drive, produce the drive, and then they're loaded up onto third-party commercial platforms as PDF or TIFF or native. If they're Excel files, you get them in a native format. And literally teams of people for a year and a half are going through these documents.
This is where you needed, of course, a law firm that specialized in that, had the manpower to go through all of that.
In fact, our suit, and this is sort of important, if there's any fighters watching this, I encourage them to go to ufcclassaction.com. On that site, they can insert their email address.
I'll put the link down below. Just send it to me at the end, and I'll
So on that site, they can put their email address in. It's confidential. They can ask us questions. They can request a call. But also for just the general public, most of the very important and prominent case documents are uploaded on there. So you can actually download our expert reports. You can download the certification order. You can download the complaints. So you'll see much of our best evidence is going to be in the expert reports, and the judge actually refers to some of our best evidence in his certification order.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. When we're done with this, just send me the link so I can put it in there so everyone watching. I will put it down there. If you're a fighter watching, confidential, it's down there. Nothing to lose. Can find lots of information, maybe relevant. Now, I want to ask you. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, the only other thing I just want to make sure I say this before we finish is to the fighters, the impact of the class certification order now means you are part of the class. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to opt in. You are now part of the class. Fighters are likely to get solicitations, and some of the solicitations I've already seen say stuff like, in order to share in your portion of the recovery, you need to retain a lawyer. That is not true. You are already part of the class. And in fact, I would encourage fighters, unless you are contacted by one of the 5 firms listed on the legal team tab of that website, disregard it. Those 4 national firms that I was telling you about that I had to recruit have been appointed class counsel. So you are already represented. You don't have to opt in. You don't need to retain a lawyer. You are already part of the group. And those efforts are basically seeking to split our class up, which weakens the class as a whole.
Right. On those videos that start with part of the interview at the very beginning, and then you want to, I just noted, like, we're about 35 minutes in, I just noted this. What you just said now about fighters not need, like they're automatically part of it. I'm going to put that as the intro. Then I'm going to move. So, because I think that part is like, there you go. There you have it. That's the kicker. Sure. And we're going to go into those details because that's important. I just want to ask you real quick, out of curiosity, Nate Quarry. Now, my memory might suck here. I think he did an interview years ago. I think it was with Luke Thomas. They talk about his comic book fighting zombies. Looks awesome.
His comic books are awesome, by the way. Zombie Cage Fighter.
Can you send him along with a shirt?
Oh, his shirts are really cool too. I've got probably 4 of them. His shirts are great as well.
Yeah, if you don't have the comic in there, if you can, okay. Jokes aside, or not a joke, maybe, I don't know. But more seriously, I think he said, and correct me if I'm wrong, please. I think he said at this point, because of the dates involved and like there's things that after a certain amount of time, it's too late. I think he said that he will not be making money, but is continuing on the cause because it's the right thing to do. Am I getting this right? He's not going to profit from this?
You are correct. What happened with Nate was Nate did not qualify for the bout class because his last bout was before December 16, 2010. And I'm going from memory. I think it was September. So he just missed. We had filed Nate as the named plaintiff for the identity class. We initially were seeking a second class to recover damages for the UFC taking fighters' likeness rights and using it in things like video games, T-shirts, action figures, cards, all that stuff that they use fighter images for. That class did not get certified. And the reason it did not get certified is the judge essentially said, it's impossible for us to adequately allocate damages because the claims are too individualized on the image side. We didn't have the data. We didn't have a robust set of data to show fighters were damaged in similar ways. So that's why he denied it. He didn't deny that class because fighters weren't injured. And this is important. I want people to understand this. He's not saying fighters weren't injured. He's not saying fighters didn't get screwed. He's saying we just can't establish class-wide impact on image rights because it's too individual.
It would have to be individual, case-by-case basis, yes, which would be a whole other matter, which the MMAFA couldn't cover, at least maybe not under this context right now.
Yes.
Yeah, understand. Although I want to ask, I feel like we're always getting a little bit off track from the main subject matter, which we're going to get to in a moment. But if I think, as a total geek that I am, I'm thinking Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker, and Star Wars. Like, Isn't it like typical to have contracts where people do get their likeness sometimes for life, like people who do Star Wars movies, like Lucasfilm can use their face forever and toys and merchandising. Is there a difference here? If it's on contract, what would be the difference between that and, let's say, Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones?
The difference is the image rights in MMA were essentially given for peanuts. There was
Okay, got it.
There was little to no consideration given for those rights. In fact, just to give you an example of a story, John Fitch, when that merchandising rights agreement first was circulated, John Fitch kind of objected. He's like, "Well, I don't want to sign that." And then he said, "Well, can we negotiate the term of it so it expires after 5 years, or it expires after 7 years, or 10 years?"
Yeah.
The UFC response to this, just for people who weren't paying attention or are new to the sport, the UFC's response was they fired him. Not only did they fire John, they said, "We're going to fire your whole gym, AKA, and we're not going to use your agency because you didn't play ball with us.
Mm-hmm.
You're not our partner."
Yeah.
Result of that was, and they did this very publicly because they wanted to send a message to everybody else.
Crazy. It's crazy.
If you don't sign it, we will not use your gym. We will not use your agents.
Yeah.
You'll be out of the UFC. So the result of that was Fitch signed, because now it was not only affecting John, it was affecting Kane, it was affecting Cormier, his whole gym. Josh Thompson. He felt like he had no choice. Had it just been him, I think, and I'm sure John has said this, Fitch would have been fine. Okay, I'll be out of the UFC. I'll go to Strikeforce.
Yeah. Bellator. I think he is he in Bellator now, or don't remember. He's in Bellator, right?
I believe he retired.
Okay.
Yes. So at that time, this would have been 2008-ish.
Yeah.
Strikeforce was a fairly prominent promotion then. And John would have been fine going to fight for Coker if it just applied to him. And that's why the UFC expanded it. No, we'll threaten your entire gym, all your teammates.
Yeah.
Just to give another example, and this is sort of just a personal anecdote as to the kind of guy John is. So when we file suit, Fitch is a named plaintiff. Fitch actually moved to Nevada because he didn't want to tarnish AKA, the gym. He was afraid if I stay at AKA, me being a named plaintiff will affect my teammates.
Oh my God.
So he moved.
That's messed up, because I guess I'm going to say, I guess if someone's watching this, you probably know, but I'm going to say the obvious in case other people, don't know this. Like, if you're here because you saw an interview I did with a sci-fi writer or something, and now you're watching this and you're like, MMA, what's this again? There's so for MMA fighters, the gym they train at, it's kind of like the level of trust you need to have with the other people around, because you're going to be talking techniques you're going to be using in your next fight. You spend years, and people know what your weakness is in training. They know what your strengths are. So this is all kind of like the people you train with. It's a very secret thing, and things happen in sparring you're not supposed to talk about. Like, if this guy had won over this guy, they're not supposed to go out bragging about it. Even if they change gyms afterwards for whatever reason, there's a code of honor where normally you don't talk about these things. So I want to make it short and brief, but I'm trying to convey that for someone to leave the gym when there was no drama, no rupture, no disagreement, no monetary gain elsewhere. Sometimes fighters do have to move on, but it's kind of like either they have no choice for the sake of their career, like, okay, I need to get this kind of training elsewhere, or drama happen. Of course, we're human beings, and these are high stakes, high intent, high stress, all that. But for someone to move out of the gym under these circumstances, almost as in, I don't want you to be affected by what's going to happen through me. I guess I'm trying to say, for that world, for that type of person, is a very sad thing. That's what I'm trying to convey here for anyone who might not be aware. if you see me
Yes,
react very strongly to what Rob just said.
it's a very sad thing, and it was
Yeah,
a fairly huge personal sacrifice that John made.
immense. Yeah,
because he believed in this so much, he felt it was so necessary to do. He left his gym, and
AKA
you're trying
is
to convey.
again for people who don't know, AKA is like one of the easily top five, gyms for MMA. I mean, Daniel Cormier, as you said, Cain Velasquez, like,
Josh
anyway,
Thompson,
that doesn't matter. But I mean, we're talking like that. If you're in that gym, you're like
elite.
in a very good place. Like, yeah.
Yes, yep, and he was willing to do that personal sacrifice, and you know, as you were saying, that's basically like leaving your family.
Yeah, I was trying to avoid the cliches, but it is. Yeah, I did. Yeah, that word kept coming to me. I wanted to avoid the cliches. I wanted to just, because sometimes you use cliches and people can, oh yeah, sure. So I wanted to really give the exact arguments why. But yes, it is a family. I mean, look, anyone who, even people who it's not their career, just a place you train at, and people know your weaknesses, they know your strengths. When you spar with someone, you get to know them in ways. Like if you see them fatigue in this context, that's part of his character. Okay, I know what fatigues him. Is he getting overwhelmed if I strike him a bit too much on the head? Is he getting like discouraged if he's grappling and he can't get out? You get to know someone on a very personal level, and they get to know you on a very personal level, and
yes. Like you're saying, there has to be a level of trust. I want to train with you. I want to get better.
Yeah,
I have to trust that you're not going to hurt me.
Yeah, and that's right for me. This is not my career. It's just training does that, and then you don't care who this guy voted for or not, or you don't care like if you agree with because you. And again, it's not even my career. It's just I'm just telling you if you haven't trained in a gym, like in a combat sport. So imagine for someone it's his profession. Like it's crazy. Anyway. Okay, Rob, look, 45 minutes in. Please tell me this new change, like what are you hoping it'll do? What does it do immediately? Maybe not legally, but right now just in the aspect of prevention, it might already start changing UFC contracts. Although maybe that's dangerous for you to start going into. I don't know how the law works in that regard. But go ahead. Like I'm letting you tell us what does this do?
So procedurally, what happens is the UFC is going to file a notice of appeal that's due by August 23rd. We will file a response, assuming the UFC files on August 23rd. Our response, I believe, is due September 5th. And that's to the Ninth Circuit. Basically, what that notice asks is the UFC is asking the Ninth Circuit, we want to appeal Boulware's class certification order on these grounds. And they don't do a full briefing. This is just requesting the right to file an appeal. The Ninth Circuit should say yes or no within 2 to 4 months, say, whether they're going to take that appeal or not. It's possible they will just say, no, denied. We're not taking that appeal.
Sorry, so did you say they just need to say if they're going to do the appeal? They don't need to say yet what the reasons are?
They file a notice asking the Ninth Circuit, can we file an appeal?
Okay, so they don't even give a reason yet. They're just saying, we want to do this.
They say on what grounds, but they don't. It's not a full briefing. It's very minimal.
Okay, bullet points. Right.
Yes, basically bullet points. And then if the Ninth Circuit takes the appeal, they will schedule a briefing. So that's when you see, the at-length arguments. After that briefing, there's usually a hearing. But it's possible the Ninth Circuit will say, we don't need to take this appeal because Olin was dispositive and the judge followed Olin. It's possible they won't even hear the appeal. And if that's the case, say in 4 months from now, we should proceed to summary judgment and get a trial date.
Okay, let's say you win. I mean, how long can this take?
If there is no appeal, we could get a trial date, say, maybe at the end of next year. We might have a trial date.
There's likely to be, right? They have a long time to prepare for this.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it'll be a year out. If the appeal is taken, figure will be 2.5 years out from a trial date. assuming we win the appeal. But for the first time, there's sort of, we can see the horizon now. We can see the end point. There's light at the end of this tunnel now. The case is moving.
The judge, I think, had some harsh words for UFC, right?
We thought the opinion was great. I mean, he basically read our complaint and read the order. There's a lot of crossover between them. But I mean,
yeah.
To us, it was obvious.
What did the judge say? It was because I think he said some things that were really harsh about what the UFC was doing.
Yeah. I mean, he said that they basically used coercive tactics to lock fighters into exclusive contracts for basically the duration of their active career. This is exactly what we said.
When the judge already saying that's
I mean, that's what we alleged. He said it's obvious they have market power.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
do you call it a monopoly or a monopsony in their case?
Monopsony.
Is it?
He called them a monopsony, but due to their market share, they would actually be both. Our case is a monopsony.
Right. I'm not gonna insult law by explaining it myself, but if you wanted to say real quick for viewers the difference between a monopoly and a monopsony.
They're inverse of each other. So a monopoly is one supplier of goods to the public. Monopsony is one buyer of an input. The UFC is actually both. So that they are the dominant supplier of events of top tier MMA.
Yeah.
And they are literally the only place a fighter can go to reach the top. You have to go there.
Isn't that crazy how this company is both?
Oh, by a huge amount.
It's just ridiculous.
So I'll cite John Nash here for a second.
Yeah.
In 2022, just to give you an idea as to the scope of this, the UFC's profit margin would be more, or profit amount. It was like something like $387 million in EBITDA. That amount is more than all other boxing promoters and MMA promoters combined. All of them.
Yeah. Boxing and MMA. Yeah. Every other MMA company, all of the boxing together, UFC made more.
UFC made more.
Yeah, which is why I don't want to hear it when people are like, oh, they're getting paid. No, they're not. And then you have like stuff like what happened with Wonderboy Thompson, who made weight, didn't want to fight a fighter who was over the weight, and they're not paying him on the grounds that he didn't fight. But he made weight. He paid his training camp. He took the flight. And now they're not paying him.
Correct. And these are the kind of things you see when you have a monopolist, you have a monopsonist. They just dictate. They don't have to compete. They dictate.
Because a boxer, they wouldn't want to piss him off. They would want to keep him, right?
Exactly right. That's exactly right. Boxer, you do that to a boxer, they'll fire you.
Yeah, they're going to be like, I'm never dealing with this promotion again. My whole gym is not going to deal with you again. It's going to be the inverse.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Inverse. Anyway. Yeah. Yeah, it's it's just my God. And one thing that's really interesting is because it's a tough guy sport, there's a lot of wannabe tough guys that are fans of the sport, and then when they see Dana White be kind of like basically saying something like, don't whine, do your job, that really appeals to people who don't understand toughness, but they like this simulation of toughness, and they think that this is like, oh, it's a no bull crap attitude, and then they're like, well, he didn't fight, and they just parrot those points. And it's interesting because it's kind of like they I don't know what it is, but Dana White really has a way of tapping into a certain fan base and basically convincing that people asking for basic worker rights are prima donnas.
it's a very authoritarian mindset that Dana White appeals to.
Yeah.
I don't. It doesn't appeal to me. I don't really understand that, but he definitely has an audience.
Yeah. No, I don't know. Again, I'm talking about a portion of the fan. No, obviously, we're fans of the sport, or at least, I mean, you know, we're fans, although maybe jaded ones. I don't know if you still watch the sport at this point, or do you
I
keep
still
up with it?
watch, but it has to be sort of a bigger event. I don't watch, like I used to.
Yeah.
The bigger events, I'll watch. I still watch.
Yeah, I'm kind of there. That's one of the reasons why I dropped the MMA show channel. Just to do that, I would have to keep up with it in a way that I just didn't have time for, or even the energy. To be honest with you, like, and I did.
Yeah.
And the thing is that I kind of saw like what it was, and like, yeah, sure, I'm just doing my thing, but to me, as it is right now, because of the UFC's monopoly / monopsony, whatever future one has in MMA, if you want to call it journalism, is just sucking up to the UFC. There's very other little avenue, and not very interesting. Like if you get somewhere, it's kind of like play ball or get lost, and it's like, well, there's no point to it really, unless you're willing to do that. Like, yeah.
So to that point, this is very important. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
The monopoly just doesn't just hurt the fighters. it actually cripples the industry because what happens is agents can no longer do their job. So you don't have agents in MMA.
They're brokers. They're brokers for the UFC.
Literally, they are brokers.
The same way you have ship brokers, you have stock brokers. They're fighter brokers.
Yes,
they're not agents.
They're fighter brokers.
And anytime there's an agent, Dana White is sure to, which ones are the real agents, because Dana White's going to talk shit about them.
Or just not deal with them.
Yeah.
The same with media. If you were an actual journalist, you got pushed out. You weren't credentialed. You couldn't. You didn't get the same access to talent. Stuff would happen behind the scenes to some of the more prominent writers. It's industry wide what occurs. The fix for this, and it's really very simple. A lot of fans are afraid of this. You have to separate rank and title from the promoter.
Yes. Rank
and title controlled by the promoter leads to the UFC. It could have been anybody. UFC did it first. And the reason UFC did it first, in my opinion, is Lorenzo Fertitta was on the Nevada State Athletic Commission in 2000, the year 2000. At the same time, the Ali Act was passed, the year 2000. The Ali Act said boxer. It didn't say combat sport athlete, because at that time,
I think, so close, right? So close.
Yeah. So at that time, I think MMA was a little too niche to a lot of people. It wasn't on Congress's radar. Yeah. But to people who knew Lorenzo, I can own a sport. I don't need to deal with outside sanctioning bodies. I'll do my own title. And if you really think about what's going on, if Roger Goodell could just step in and say, I don't want the Bengals playing in the Super Bowl. They're too small. I'm going to replace them and put in the Dallas Cowboys. People are okay with that? No. There'd be congressional hearings about that. There'd be lawsuits. The implications of that would be very, very apparent to everybody.
Yeah.
That's exactly what goes on in MMA all the time. All the time.
Yeah, because they like to pretend. This is the interesting part, and we're talking about Dana White, and it's Dana White likes to pretend that it's a meritocracy, but it's very it might be a meritocracy. Well, not really, but even if I were to be generous, I would say it's a meritocracy of popularity, but not even, because it's also like how much do you go along with him? So it's not a meritocracy at all, in either direction, actually. But
so Mike
Tyson, if I wanted to be generous, I would have said of popularity, but already shouldn't be what it's based on for a sport, even if it was that, which it isn't even. But yeah.
So I just tweeted this out last night, and the date is August 17th.
You X'd it. You X'd it. You didn't tweet it. You X'd it.
Oh, I X'd it. Yeah, tweet, whatever.
Apologize to Musk. Okay, no, sorry. Go ahead.
It was a video of Mike Tyson from like 15, 20 years ago.
Okay.
And Tyson says, and this is, again, very important, Carlos Newton drills this into all our guys that, you know, we speak with. Boxers hire a promoter. Think about that. They hire a promoter. Promotions work for the boxer, not the other way around. The boxer is not an employee of the promoter.
Which
that's the trick that was pulled. And they did that by controlling rank and title. In boxing, everybody else is a service provider to the fighter. The agent serves the fighter. The promoter promotes the fighter.
And for anyone,
compete to get sanctioning fees.
Yeah,
the whole industry relies upon the fighter, who is the product. So Tyson comes out and says, "Why is somebody getting my check and then cutting a check to me?
Yeah,
that's not happening. I'm getting the check and paying you."
Yeah, that's interesting. That's very. I'll probably repost. It's not only retweet, right? I'll repost your X. I'll retweet your tweet. Yeah, and you know, for anyone, any mother hugger out there who insists that, oh, but fighters, we're not going to see the fights we want to see. You know, the UFC gives us the fights we want to see. Because of the UFC, we're not seeing John Jones and Ngannou. So,
correct.
So because of that, there's a lot of fights we're not seeing because of that. That's another illusion. That's a trick, people. And you know, okay, let's argue for a moment. Let's argue for a moment that someone truly believe that. If you see the last few years of boxing, because what happened is, you know, MMA started getting more popularity during COVID because they were back first and all that. And I think what happened is people were like, oh, MMA, people didn't know MMA before. It's pretty exciting, like the fights and all that. And you know, and boxing, I think, kind of went, okay, and actually it wasn't even that. I think it's also like the YouTubers starting to do boxing and being popular, and boxing kind of went, you know, yeah, okay, maybe we were resting on our laurels a bit too much. If you look at the last few years of boxing, they have realized that we're making money when we do the fights people want to see. The fighters are realizing that. So whatever argument you had is already outdated by many years, because in boxing they have all these rights, and we're seeing. I'm not a boxing fan, okay, but even I'm aware. It's these past few years are really good boxing. Even I'm aware of that, and I'm not a boxing guy. So don't come at us with like, oh, we're not going to see the fights we want to see. Bullshit. We're not seeing the fights we want to see because of it. That's the other.
I've been sort of a fan of MMA since around 1995, 96, and I've been actively involved. Yeah, and I've been actively involved as more than a fan since around 2001. That entire time until now, every year you see the exact same headline: boxing's dead, boxing's dying. It's just nonsense. It is utter nonsense. Yeah. Just to give you an idea, so there's over a dozen boxers that made 8-figure purses last year. There's 2 MMA fighters, but they had to box to get it. They were boxing.
Oh no! You just killed me right there. You just killed me. That was, oh my God. Are you? I didn't even see it coming. I should have seen it coming, right? I thought you were gonna say like, oh,
yeah. So the other point that I want to make, and this is sort of important. We say this when we go to Washington D.C.
Yeah.
We tell D.C. because the owners of the event have corrupted sport in that fighters actually can't compete independently to get to the top. They need them to bestow the right to them. The owners keep the vast majority of the revenue made from events, and the result of that is you get fighters fighting more often than they should. You get fighters fighting longer than they should, because they never got the big paydays.
Yeah,
they never got the big paydays.
Yeah, You know, the thing is that I'm not gonna name names, but there's fighters who I'm a huge fan of. I'm thinking one in particular. I'm not gonna name him, but huge fan. And in the past few years, he's been in a serious decline compared to his previous output. It's messed up. That my thought is, I hope that the UFC cuts him so he can do some like celebrity boxing and actually get paid. This is my mindset because the thing is, as a humane person, I mean, I'll always watch him fight wherever he goes, whatever combat sport. But the thing is, I'm kind of hoping like, look, he's never gonna get that belt anymore. Maybe he could have once upon a time, but he's not. And again, I'm not gonna name him. But at this point, I don't believe in it. But I'm still a big fan. I still want to see him do things. But at this point, what I wish for him, because he's been effed over both by circumstances and the company, and I hope it's messed up. I'm hoping that he gets cut from the UFC. So he has no choice because the guy is like is made of something else and he wants to go after that belt still, but it's not gonna happen. So I'm hoping he's gonna fight some celebrity boxer, so a YouTuber in a boxing match or something, so he can make real money, which is not how a sport like. It's insane that a guy who was so close to the top in a sport, in the moment of his decline, this is what I'm hoping for him. It makes no sense.
Just to elaborate on that point, there's articles in boxing and managers, the good managers in boxing will actually say this. Their job is they want to get their fighter into title contention as fast as humanly possible because the next 4 to 6 fights are going to be brutal. That's where 99% of that boxer's career earnings are going to be made, those 4 to 6 fights.
Yeah.
And then as soon as they start to decline, they're no longer in contention. Get out. You're out.
And that fighter I'm talking about, and that fighter I'm talking about has had so many more wars and damage taken until that fight went on too long. Until that one fight went on too long. It's
those boxing managers and a lot of the boxers know, as soon as I'm on this side of my career, get out. It's not supposed to be a 20-year career.
But boxers are actually, it's kind of interesting because they're fighters and they have that mindset, they have that drive, they have that stubbornness. But I feel like they start their career more educated. I don't say educated in a condescending way, please. I mean, they're more aware, more informed. There you go. Not I shouldn't say educated because that has connotations. But they're more informed and aware of that notion. And it's like they go in and even they are aware of, I'm going to start with some easy fights. I'm going to get those good fights. I'm going to let my manager figure things out. And maybe now they're taking a few more chances because maybe they got a bit too careful in the years before. But look, it's all balanced out in the end. And then they know that at some point they have to get on. And then the fights they take after are maybe just to get a few pace here and there. But they're no longer going to be fighting the current champion or stuff like that. They're more aware of that and more accepting. And the fans are not shitting on them for that.
So in my view, that is literally just a symptom of boxers compete in a market that enjoys competition. So boxers' mindset is, I'm a prize fighter. Where's the prize? Show me the money. Yeah. That's what they think. In MMA, guys think, I want to get to the UFC. You see the difference?
I feel like if I was managing a fighter or something, this is a very vague idea. Please don't dissect it too much. I'm not gonna have answers for it, but I think in a weird way, I'd almost be like, you want to sign with the UFC? No. Wait. Start beef with this social media dude who's fit. I would legit try to do shit like that. I wouldn't even tell him like go to the UFC. I'd be like, wait, hold your horses. Let's try to do this instead because there's more money. It's only one fight. You get paid. You're still free. You don't. And I know it's easier said than done. I'm just kind of half joking, but I kind of half mean it as well. Like.
But here's the difference. So because the UFC was allowed to issue their own title, their title is the only one that matters. In boxing, I can compete for the WBC title regardless of who promotes me. I can promote myself, and I can still get that belt. Those belt holders and those top contenders is where all the money's made. That's who the public pays to see, those top guys. Boxing, I have independent paths to get to the top.
Yeah, Ngannou would still, under those rules, Ngannou, when he left the UFC, would still have a belt declaring him the heavyweight champion.
John would have to follow him. Exactly right. That next.
So for anyone saying otherwise,
yes. And just to allow them just to strip it, they're making a mockery of sport, literally.
Yeah, it's nonsense, and and also interestingly enough, I think BKFC at some point they had like the fireman's bare knuckle, like they had a belt that was from the 30s or something before boxing made the gloves mandatory, and it was like from some fire department there was a belt, and I was like, can anyone make a belt? And just I don't know, but it was interesting how they had that before BKFC started making their own belts. Like they had that, so it's kind of like there's a lot of belts that just can be made up, basically. I guess I could make a belt. I could make the awesome fighter belt, and but it's not like, so basically UFC is just a made up belt.
It is. It's a fake belt, and the commissions, I think, are exposing themselves to liability because they are sanctioning this as sport, and it is literally not sport.
Yeah,
it's an athletic event, but it's not structured the way sport is. Sport requires objective criteria and an ascension ladder based upon merit. This is a reality show where the producer, the owners, decide who gets to move up or not. That's why the pay split was reversed. In order for me to get pay-per-view money, I have to sign what they tell me to. I can't negotiate because I can't win a title that matters outside of the UFC. That was accomplished back when the UFC bought Strikeforce. Now they had virtually every 1 through 15 fighter in every weight division. That's why Joe Silva sends the email, "We own MMA." They knew what they were doing.
Which is such a stupid title to put in an email. I can't comprehend how someone in that profession would do that, but whatever.
The judge actually cited that document in his class certification order. He cites it.
It's anyway. And that's also, as a quick side note, why Fury going Tyson Fury going up against Ngannou. That's also why the belt is not on the line, because people are like, how come the belt is not on the line? Because Ngannou came out of nowhere. It's not like an official. No, it's interesting if he wins. I don't think he will, but I don't know. Let's say, you're telling me there's one chance. I think that Atlas made that joke recently, like the Jim Carrey thing. That's why it was in my mind. I ripped him off.
So the unfortunate thing is you brought up bare knuckle fighting.
Yeah.
John Fitch on his podcast just a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
Said, and I totally agree with this. Hey, bare knuckle guys, be careful, because bare knuckle is trying to emulate the UFC model, and that just results in monopoly, where the promoter dictates ascension because they're issuing their own title. That should not be allowed.
Yeah, which I was acknowledging, by the way. Yeah, that was, in case, I don't know if I came across as unclear, but that was my point. Yeah. So interesting. Yeah, he would know. Yeah. But that was my point. Yeah, in case it was because they had like a bill from a fire department or something, which is cool. Don't get me wrong. It's cool if it's like an addition to the like. It's kind of cool. Oh, this is like a bill from a fire department from the 30s or something. I might be getting this completely wrong. I'm going by memory. I do think it's cool. I do think it's fun to have like fun belts, if you will. But if you're a sport, you need the actual, like, if a sports team won the Stanley Cup, maybe a school gives them like a little star, like for most awesome team that came to see us. That's fun.
Yes.
It's cool.
Yeah.
And maybe they can wear it proudly in a photo op or something. It's fun. But it's not the Stanley Cup. It shouldn't pretend to be the Stanley Cup.
That's exactly right. Yes, I totally agree with that.
If a team gets a mug for winning, the promoter gives you a mug. The mug is not the Stanley Cup. Right?
Yeah, the Stanley Cup is a league sanctioned championship. It has to be a sanctioned title, independent of team. That's a very good example. So one of the analogies we use is that the UFC title would be the equivalent of the Dallas Cowboys saying, "Come play for the Cowboys Cup." And oh, by the way, we determine who plays us. We determine when. We determine who's on the field. It's insane.
It is. Do you think? Now, I mentioned it early, and I know it's kind of like a messy subject matter because of how ridiculous, and we're already like over an hour, so we're gonna try to wrap it up soon. But I'm gonna go back, and I'm sorry for this. I'm gonna go back a little bit to slap fighting. And because actually, let's go with BKFC actually, because we brought it up, and it's actually better. I think it's a better example because then we don't get muddled over how stupid slap fighting is. So what you're doing now in MMA, you said the Ali Act said only boxers. Now you're doing this class action lawsuit. Is anything, and look, I'm not holding it against you if it isn't, because when you started this, BKFC wasn't even on the radar yet. Is what you're doing going to be only an example for one day BKFC fighters to follow, or is it gonna help them directly? Would the MMAFA expand to other combat sports than MMA despite the title?
Very good question. So the second thing we're doing independent of the class action lawsuit is we're seeking to pass the Ali Expansion Act. That's why we take trips to Washington, D.C., and we basically speak to the congressmen and senators in D.C. saying why this act is needed. We had 2 congressional hearings. We hope that bill is reintroduced. That bill, when it passes, will cover all professional combat sports athletes. Okay. Not just mixed martial artists. So if you're a pro in any other combat sport, that this bill would now apply to you. The import of it is, one, it requires disclosure of financials. So boxers, after their fight, find out how much that event generated. So they know what the money was. They use that the next time they're negotiating with the promoter. I know my events bring in $20 million. I want 16.
Which athletic commission claimed that it was more advantageous for fighters to keep it secret? That was so corrupt. That was so Utah. Corrupt.
That was Utah, and that is beyond corrupt. In fact, not only is it absurdly corrupt, it was obviously written for them and they were asked to put it out. It's contrary to what every other sport does. Every other sport, the salary information is public. The players' associations share it amongst each other because it drives pay higher. And in fact, other states are now passing transparency in pay and pay equity statutes for exactly that reason, to raise salaries and wages. Yeah. For them to say secrecy is better is just absurd.
Yeah, in the original Ali Act, Commission, like
in the original Ali Act, there's a finding where the governmental accounting office says transparency in pay will provide boxers leverage to negotiate higher purses. It's right in there. Yeah. They're saying the exact opposite.
Yeah, that is so corrupt. The Utah Athletic Commission can go F themselves. Like, seriously, it was so manipulative, corrupt. Obviously, you got paid. Obviously, if you're in the Utah Athletic Commission, you got paid by the UFC. It's
even more bizarre to me is, so the Utah it's called the Utah Sports Commission, which is basically sort of the equivalent of a tourism board to bring in sporting events to Utah. The governor of Utah is a chair. State senator from Utah is a chair of this commission. That commission paid the UFC money to come to Utah. Again, those commissions are opening themselves to liability. You're paying the UFC to bring what is not a sport into your state. This is crazy. Was it
the one where recently that was like, oh yeah, it's really nice, they have restaurants, and they were like kind of doing like a tourism promotion package.
Salt Lake City. Yeah, Salt Lake City.
And there was a guy from like Salt Lake City, like just talking in the post-fight conference, right?
Yes.
That's the one. That was so weird, man. That was so like, what the F is going on there?
I mean, just think about it. So the exploitation of fighters is being sponsored by Utah taxpayers. That's crazy.
The implication, like, what's funny? Like you're like, I thought I was coming in like well informed overall, and then you're gonna explain the law to me. but you're dropping stuff on me. Like the boxing thing earlier, like the MMA fighters, it wasn't boxing. I was like, and now you're like, you the taxpayers are promoting this, or paying for this for taxes. I'm like,
It's gross. It is literally gross. It's gross.
You're like, you're hitting me with the left and rights here. I'm like, it's okay.
A lot of people just don't.
I'm not okay. If anyone doesn't know me enough, when I laugh sometimes, I'm laughing kind of like to channel out like disgust for a situation. Actually, I'm not. It's not funny. I'm just I have to laugh it up because I'm trying to also make this entertaining. But it is disgusting.
It's unlike anything I've ever seen. This industry is truly unique. I honestly think the Utah Athletic Commission does not realize the history of sanctioning or the history of athletic commissions or why they came about. I don't think they know the history, because if they did, they would realize we are exposing ourselves to liability.
That would be hilarious. That I would laugh my ass off if it happens. I would, man, that would be so funny. Like it really would. And now I'm saying this with a straight face instead of laughing when I say it would be funny, but I would laugh. I would laugh it up. I think, like it's kind of crazy because I was thinking in the history books of sports, whatever you want to call that, almanac, I don't know. It's kind of like, oh yeah, the UFC was a young sport. This is what happens in young sport. But then you inform me like, no, boxing from the beginning was already better. And I'm like, what the? So there's not even the excuse of it's a new sport.
No,
it was designed from the start to be a trap for.
It was.
Yeah, like you have this skill, like you know.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. This was designed from the start to lead to this result. The only question was, how long would it take? If you remember back in 2000, I believe it was 2004, the UFC sent Chuck Liddell to fight in the Pride Grand Prix.
Yeah.
And the reason this was sort of fortuitous for Pride that Chuck got sent and not Randy, because I think Randy Couture would have won that tournament. The reason
Most
Randy didn't
likely,
go,
yeah, with the skills at hand, because of the rock paper scissors of MMA. I think Randy Couture could have.
Yeah, exactly right. Not that those weren't great fighters. I just think stylistically, Randy would have won that tournament. The reason Randy didn't go was Randy was the UFC champ. They didn't want to send their champ, so they sent Chuck because they were confident Chuck was going to win. Well, Chuck didn't win. Quentin did. Rampage.
Yeah.
That delayed the UFC's acquisition of Pride, because now after Quentin beats Chuck to the viewing public, some of the best fighters are in Pride, which was true. They were. That's why the UFC had to eventually acquire Quentin Jackson's contract. They bought him from WFA because they had to bring Quentin into the UFC to get him beat. Because otherwise, shoot, Chuck's our champion. Quentin dominated him, right?
And that's something else. And you're bringing a very good point, and that's something else. And I guess maybe one of the final points, because I feel like we're wrapping, like this is an onion. We're wrap thing after thing after thing, and we could go on forever, I'm sure. But like, let's try to hit an hour and a half, I guess.
Just to wrap that up, I don't think, and I'm going from memory, I think that is the only time in modern history the UFC did a co-promotion. I think that is the only one, when they sent Chuck to Pride.
Yeah, and my point was going to be, this also speaks when you said they needed him beat. They brought it to me. When you see how they treat Anderson Silva in the end and all those things, like in boxing, you don't see that. Yeah, because the boxer is the one in control, is the product. I mean, unless really crappy contracts or whatever. But let's say you don't go with Don King or something. But my point is more along the lines of, if Anderson Silva had been a boxer, the end of his career would have been much more celebrated. It wouldn't have been like, we're going to feed you to this guy. And then like the other guy who beat Anderson Silva, like just beat up his idol that he didn't want to do, but the company told him to. And then he's crying because he had to beat up his idol. And you're like, this is sick. Like Anderson Silva should have gone out and a fight celebrated. a fun fight, and you're like kind of like he's been doing in boxing now, I guess. He's still doing what he wants to, and but the thing is that like you're in that company that's not gonna respect what you did for a sport. It's not gonna respect what you did for a company. They're gonna they didn't even let GSP do a boxing match a few years ago because he was still under contract after his MMA retirement, and he had to ask UFC permission. Like, it's not UFC doesn't even reward loyalty, doesn't reward any of that, and that's madness to me, because it's kind of like Anderson Silva, like one of the greatest of all time. For some, the greatest. Like, all those things can be debated, but the way they treated him at the end was literally like a used car. You know what? We're gonna get one more ride out of you, and then we're gonna throw you in the ditch.
No, it's a very wrestling mindset where you use the former star to put over the new star. Again, this is unique to MMA. In boxing, as you said, boxers leave at the top. Floyd, I believe, is 49-0. They don't feed him to guys that are going to crush
McGregor.
him.
No, McGregor was the 50th.
Possibly, yeah.
I think so. I think he went to around 50 with McGregor, but that was a fun fight. That's my point. That was a fun fight.
Yes.
That wasn't, but I'm going to face the young, hungry champion.
Yeah, exactly. Floyd was not in danger in that fight, right? He's not in danger at all. Floyd knows that.
Whereas it exposed that the refs were kind of corrupt, the judges because you see the scorecards, but Mayweather planned to gas him out, I think. And anyway, that's another conversation. But yeah, exactly. He wasn't.
Point being, his promoter, because he is the promoter, is not putting him in a bout to get beat.
No, Mayweather, whatever. Yeah, promotion.
And then the other thing you kind of teed me up on, because you mentioned him, is Don King. So I have to use our line. Don King, was sued for fraud, for theft, for a bunch of other things many, many times. And in fact, many people believe he was sort of the impetus for why the Ali Act came into being, was to
really?
Address Don King. Yeah, because Don King was using options. If you want to fight my title holder, you have to sign options where I promote you. King was doing that. Our response to people who think boxing is so bad, even Don King paid multiples of what the UFC pays in terms of revenue percentage doing all of that.
That's a damning statement. That is.
He paid 2.5 to 3 times the amount the UFC pays based upon the revenue to the fighter, even stealing.
That's it. You keep hitting me with them. You keep throwing them at me.
What blows people away is in boxing, and boxing's had some problems, right? So in boxing, promoters would go and try to bribe sanctioning bodies to move their fighters up or to give them title shots or whatever, right? In MMA, the UFC just removed the need to bribe anybody else. They just control it from the start.
So you're saying that the bad guy of boxing, the villain of boxing, let's call him that for fun, of Don King. You don't need to call him that because I know you're a lawyer. Maybe it's messy for you to. I say like he's the villain of boxing, for me. So that guy, at least for a casual like me, right? I'm not a boxing expert by any means, but as far as I know, like if I think like bad management in boxing, I think Don King. So you're telling me that guy, and you informed me just now that he's probably likely the impetus for the Ali Act in boxing. So that guy was so bad that an act, like law was created to deal with him or people who might follow his example later on, was still better to fighters than Dana White and the current UFC. And
just to put a bow on top, we just did a presentation to the Association of Boxing Commissions, and we posted this, tweeted this out last week. One of the slides is Don King is Santa Claus compared to the UFC. As bad as he was.
Look, I think we cannot. We're almost at 1:30. It's like perfect timing too. I don't think we can close anything stronger than that. I think that's a closing statement, right?
Well, that's good. I'll just close with two things.
Yes, go ahead, please. I
be...
was kind of making a joke that's it, but go ahead if you have things to add, of course.
So we anticipate being back in Washington, D.C. soon. So we're going to want fighter participation. We encourage anyone who wants to get involved to contact us, any of the fighters, myself. Also, go to ufcclassaction.com, put in your email. If you want any questions or you want to speak with any of the attorneys, let us know in the comment section. That will be confidential. And know that you are now part of the class. You don't have to do anything. You don't need to retain your own counsel. You are represented. Thanks for having me.
Rob, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for the information given. Thank you for all those unexpected twists that you threw at me. I was like, I'm coming in pretty informed. I'm not gonna know the law, but I'm gonna. And you blew my mind a few times there. Wow, this is, yeah, I'm gonna try to put this out as soon as possible. Probably gonna edit this tonight so I can like ASAP. Yeah, just send me the links. And everyone, thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions at all about anything that you've heard here, don't ask me, ask Rob. So go to the website, go to the link. You can leave comments, of course, you know, I'll go read them, all that good stuff. But yeah, reach out to Rob and thank you for watching. Rob, thank you very much for coming, and I hope that we get to another conversation, which, again, we're heading in the right direction. Every time second time we talk, things have advanced, you know, so hopefully we get to talk again when things have gotten even better. And, you know, like, let's see what happens over the years. I'm hoping for me to eventually open the show with a bottle of champagne or something.
Nice.